After a shock victory in Melbourne for Carlos Sainz, F1 is moving from Australia to Suzuka for the Japanese Grand Prix, as the race in Japan has moved from October to April, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top 5 teams, which are Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. Yes, Japan has moved from its traditional race setting in October to April due to F1 wanting to try and make their calendar make a little bit more sense. Suzuka is an old school high speed circuit with fast flowing sections such as the S curves, Dunlop, the Degner curves, Spoon and 130R. These corners absolutely punish the tyres, and because of that we get to see some iconic shots like this, where you can really see the tyres being put to work. The circuit is also old school, as I said, similar to Melbourne, and that means that any mistakes can and usually are punished. The circuit features a lot of grass and gravel runoff that will catch the drivers out when they make mistakes in the high-speed corners, but even so, with the modern cars, Suzuka is an almost flat-out blast, and there are not too many braking zones. This circuit will benefit teams that have strong high-speed downforce, whilst it will punish those that struggle in the high-speed sections. Because of the high-speed nature of Suzuka, Pirelli will be opting to take the hardest tyres in their range, which is the complete opposite to what we saw in Melbourne, meaning that the C1 is the hard tyre, the C2 is the medium tyre, and the C3 will be the soft compound of tyre. Last year's race saw a total of 43 pit stops, with the drivers using a mixture of soft and hard tyres or medium and hard tyres. The strategy around Suzuka is filled with variety, which helps add an additional layer of excitement and intrigue for the Grand Prix, because this means that some teams might get the strategy right and some might get it wrong. I anticipate that due to the high-speed nature, we will see a 2-stop race like we did last year. Most teams will probably use 2 sets of hard tyres, but it will be close between the soft and mediums being used for the extra stint. I anticipate teams will try and save a set of soft tyres for the main Grand Prix so that they can get the best launch possible off the grid at the start. But if they don't have any fresh set of softs, then they will have to use the medium tyres for the start of the race. Overtaking around Suzuka is not the easiest due to the lack of any real heavy braking zones. However, overtaking is still very much possible, and last year we saw that as we saw a total of 29 on-track overtakes. To help with overtaking, the circuit features only the one DRS zone, and that is down the main pit straight. There is a potential for a second DRS zone on the exit of Spoon curve, but I imagine the FIA don't want to risk there being a massive shunt at 130R due to someone keeping DRS open and getting it all wrong in the Grand Prix. Last year's pole position lap time was a 128.877, and that was set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. During this qualifying lap, he reached a top speed of 335 km per hour, and in the race itself, the fastest lap was also set by Max Verstappen, and that time was a 134.183. The difference between the qualifying and the race fastest lap is pretty big, and for me that shows the difference between the drivers going flat out in qualifying and trying to manage the pace in the Grand Prix in order to make the tyres last. With the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix being brought forward, I anticipate that the qualifying lap time will be pretty similar to last year, and the fastest lap time will probably be beaten, especially if there is a safety car towards the end of the Grand Prix and drivers get to swap onto a fresh set of the soft compound tyres. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, the Australian Grand Prix, for a short space of time, saw them move up to 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, before a penalty for Fernando Alonso relegated them back down to 5th place. Going into Suzuka, it will be interesting to see if Aston Martin have managed to resolve any issues with tyre wear like we saw in Bahrain. Saudi Arabia and Australia are not particularly high tyre wear circuits, but Suzuka will punish their tyres. With this in mind, we will really see where they are when it comes to race pace and tyre wear. Fernando Alonso had a decent race and would have finished well in Melbourne if not for the penalty. With Suzuka being one of the ultimate driver circuits, I can really see him having a very strong qualifying and putting the Aston Martin somewhere in the top 5 over one lap. When it comes to the race though, I think they could get one of the Aston Martins to finish ahead of both Mercedes, and we might see them move up to 4th place in the constructors. But once again, I can see Aston Martin falling back at the start of the race, as I don't think their race pace will be as strong as their one lap pace in qualifying, which is what we have seen so far this year. For Mercedes, Australia was a disaster of a weekend. Anything that could have gone wrong did pretty much go wrong for them. Lewis Hamilton had a power unit failure, and George Russell was involved in a last lap incident where he was caught off guard with Fernando Alonso slowing down early at the end of Sector 1. Not only this, but the car was really struggling a lot in high speed corners. We saw them struggle at turn 1 and even more so at turn 9 and turn 10. This is going to be a big worry for them going into Suzuka, as the circuit features even more high speed corners, and with corners such as the S-bends and the two Degners, we could really see them struggle there. With their current lack of stability, I feel like we might need to see them run with even more downforce than the competition, but doing so will come at a cost of increased drag. This is unless Mercedes have somehow made some big steps forward when it comes to downforce and stability at high speed. Lewis Hamilton is still less comfortable than his teammate George Russell, and because of this, I fear that there is a potential that we might see Lewis Hamilton drop out in Q2 once again. For McLaren, Australia was a clear indication that they have fully moved away from Mercedes and Aston Martin, and are much closer to Ferrari and Red Bull than it had initially seemed, and going into Suzuka, I anticipate that we will see them even closer still to Ferrari. Last year, McLaren were very strong at Suzuka due to their ability with high-speed downforce, and whilst Ferrari have improved in this regard, I still think McLaren will be strong here, and we can absolutely see them get in amongst it with the Ferrari cars. Lando Norris in Australia showed that he still has a bit of a race pace advantage when compared to Oscar Piastri, as Norris was able to be more consistent with the pace and was managing to close the gap to Charles Leclerc in the closing stages of the Grand Prix. With this in mind, I anticipate that in race trim, Norris will once again be the lead McLaren. That being said, his teammate Piastri has definitely improved in race trim from last year, and his one lap pace is something that might see him beat Norris once again in qualifying. For Ferrari, they are going into the Japanese Grand Prix just 4 points behind Red Bull, and Charles Leclerc is just 4 points off of Max Verstappen for the lead of the Drivers' Championship, as Ferrari took a 1-2 finish in Australia. Now, while this could have been down to Max Verstappen being forced into retiring, I still think they would have been able to fight Verstappen, and at least one of them would have beaten Verstappen regardless in Melbourne. This is going to give them a lot of confidence that they can fight and actually beat Red Bull at certain circuits. I think this weekend it is possible that once again they can beat at least one Red Bull, as I think Sergio Perez could be vulnerable, especially if McLaren have also improved their pace this weekend. For Carlos Sainz, he is currently in the form of his life, as he is fighting to prove that he belongs in the sport. For his teammate Charles Leclerc, he just needs to keep his head when it comes to qualifying. In Australia, Leclerc was faster in FP2 and FP3, but it came undone in qualifying, which led to him having to pit early in the Grand Prix as he used his tyres trying to get past Norris. If he keeps his pace from practicing to qualifying, then there is no reason why Charles Leclerc cannot score some wins this season, but I do think it will be a tall task for them to do that at Suzuka. And finally for Red Bull, Australia was not the best, as Max Verstappen was forced to retire from the Grand Prix very early. However, there were signs in Australia that Suzuka could be a very easy race win for him. In the high-speed downforce sections, Verstappen was on another planet, showing just how hooked up he is in the Red Bull, when of course he's not making any errors. If he can keep that pace up, then much like last year in Suzuka, it could be pure domination for him. His teammate Sergio Perez, though, has been struggling a little bit more when it comes to high-speed downforce, and usually over one lap, he is behind his teammate. Whilst Verstappen has the potential to absolutely dominate, Perez will be fighting to beat Mclaren and Ferrari, who I think will be stiff competition for him. So with that in mind then, what are my very early predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Max Verstappen, as I think he will want to bounce back and make a point by dominating. But what about the race itself? Well, I think the top midfield team and driver will be RB and Yuki Tsunoda. But what about the top 5 itself? Well, for that, I'm going to say in P5, it will be Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. P4 will be Lando Norris in the McLaren. P3 will be Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. P2 will be Charles Leclerc, as he did beat his teammate Sainz last year at Suzuka. And I think Max Verstappen will get back to winning ways and will want to try and absolutely dominate the Japanese Grand Prix. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you think will happen? In the comment section down below, let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.